Review, and Elena Casas is here for that. Hello, Elena.
Hello again, Lorna.
So let's start with the US and Obama's job speech. What have the American media been making of that speech on Thursday?
Well, it's gone pretty well down generally across the board. Let's have a look at the Huffington Post. They've got a piece entitled "Obama puts more passion into Jobs' speech than we've rarely seen in his presidency." They say the speech was a novel, telling and shrewd way of launching his re-election campaign. They say it shows the model Obama plans to follow in the months ahead, which the Huffington Post says he's going to give them hell. He says that he attacked the Republicans on the terrain on which they've most criticised him, the economy, and he made a really strong case for defending labour rights, for spending money in order to create jobs, and also put something in there for Conservatives with Medicaid cuts and some tax cuts. So the Huffington Post says the only question now really is, where has this Obama been in recent months? And now that he's come back fighting, is it too late for him and maybe too late for the US economy?
Wow, so some quite praiseworthy praising stuff there, but it can't have gone down so well with everyone, can it?
Well, no, indeed. Let's have a look at a piece in the Daily Beast, which is really quite critical. It argues that the new incentives are incidental and they won't help create jobs. A big part of that $450 billion that we've been talking about is payroll tax cuts, but the piece says there's no evidence that actually helps create jobs. They say the reason why companies aren't hiring people isn't because they need incentives to do so, it's because they just don't have enough demand to need to take on extra workers. And they say that the idea of giving ordinary people more money to try and help boost consumer spending might not work either, because if you've got a huge amount of debt, like the majority of Americans, your extra money is just going to go in there. So they say it's going to make no difference, and Obama should actually admit there's very little federal government policy can do to help create jobs.
OK, well, let's move across the other side of the Atlantic now to the British papers, because The Independent has quite a hard-hitting front page this Friday morning. Tell us more about what that's about.
Yes, this is very strong. This is the Iraqi detainee Barham Musa, who died in British custody in 2003. There was a report released yesterday which was quite damning about the British Army and the soldiers who were involved in that death. If we can look at the front page here, they've got a picture of him dead, and the title "Kicked and Punched to Death by Cowards." So really strong here. Their Middle East correspondent Robert Fisk says in a piece inside that it's not the brutality that's systematic, it's the lying about it. He interviewed the Musa's family at the time and says that the army's reaction to the death was arrogant, vicious and indifferent. He claims the reason Musa was killed was because he had seen the British soldiers looting Iraqi homes. We don't have any evidence for that, but Fisk does make a strong case for the idea that there was a systematic cover-up by the British Army of not only this atrocity, but a number committed by soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that cover-up is still going on.
As you say, very strong stuff there. And sticking with the Middle East, we've been talking a lot today about the Palestinian bid for statehood at the UN, and you've got an article about it from Haaretz, the Israeli paper.
Yes, this is one of the strongest critiques of Netanyahu's government that I've seen recently in the Israeli press. It's headlined "Israeli Pyromaniacs are setting the Middle East on fire." It says that by writing themselves into a very right-wing corner with things like refusing to apologise to the Turks over the Mavi Marmara and now refusing to give any ground to the Palestinians, the Israelis have left themselves with nowhere to go in terms of international diplomacy. They say that whatever happens with the statehood bid at the UN, the Israelis will come out looking bad, and it's Netanyahu's fault.
OK, and finally, quickly, a science story from The Guardian.
Yes, this
also
is
in
the news that scientists have discovered 2 fossilised skeletons in a cave in South Africa that could be a missing link between orangutan-type species and our own ancestors. They are Australopithecus sediba, which, yes, and it brings 2 new things to science, really, this. Firstly, the fact that their brains are much more developed than they thought the early hominids were at the epoch that this dates back to. They're about 2 million years old, so maybe our intelligence developed earlier than scientists thought, and also early man might have been much more geographically spread than we thought, because these fossils are in South Africa, whereas all others around this age are in East Africa.
OK, thanks very much indeed, Elena, for that quick history lesson there at the end of the International Press Review. Thanks very much for that. Let's get a reminder now of our top stories here.